Welcome to our May session of the Fireside Chat course on Basic Buddhism. I am Ryoen Anjo, one of the 5 volunteers in our steering committee who help bring these sessions to you. For this month's session, we will be covering issues and problems in daily life. It is chapter 9 of your book Jewels as we continue our Fireside Chat session on Introduction to Basic Buddhism for the West and Beyond. A short questionnaire has been sent to you in the last email. After our fireside chat is over today, please consider responding to the questions. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our instructor and moderator, Dr. Tanaka. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. All right, good to see you all. And we are starting our 9th session out of the 10. So next month will be our last one. And I give you a lot of credit because, as I said before, at the beginning you have a lot of people participating, and slowly it dwindles down, and we only have the most dedicated. and you are one of them. And of course, people can watch the videos, and they do. We have close to 150 times. Some people watch it maybe twice, but I know that those who are not here are also keeping up with the course. So I'm going to share, and as usual, speak for or have half an hour to go over the main points of the session. And this month, we have Chapter 9, Issues and Problems in Daily Life. And guest lay speaker will be Denise Cork, and the ordained guest speaker will be Reverend Blayne Higa from Hawaii. And so we're looking forward to what they have to share with us. So I want to begin with the 5 principles that you found at the beginning of the chapter. And this chapter is a bit different because we are taking whatever knowledge and wisdom that we have gained and applying that to the issues and problems that we face in our daily lives. So we've had chapters on history, chapters on doctrine, and now we're kind of applying what we learned especially to the problems and challenges that we face. So the first one is a phrase that we've heard a lot in our course. It's life is a bumpy road. And this is obvious to many people, but still our human nature is that we want our life to go smoothly. That's our human nature. And when things don't go smoothly or as we want, then we have issues to deal with. Some people say, why does this happen to me when life should be smooth? But Buddhism is saying that it ain't. Unfortunately, it doesn't go our way. So of all the 10 issues that we dealt in the chapter, all of these are actually examples of the fact that life is a bumpy road. What that means is that things don't go as we want. Next one is there's no divine or spiritual being who punishes and tests us or determines what happens. And anyone who studies Buddhism even a little bit finds out that this is true. But our human nature is that we have some expectation of some divine being who plays a role in our lives, and maybe some people may think he or it punishes us or even tests us. But in Buddhism, in basic Buddhism, there are no such beings. So so what happens to us happens because, as we talked about before, due to causes and condition on a horizontal level. You can determine a little bit what happens on in your daily life, of course, but many things, like if you don't mind, Sophie, I'm mentioning your name, and our her husband is in a hospital, and he doesn't have much longer to live. And this is a reality that some of us have already faced, and definitely we will all face. And so that's what Buddhism is saying. And so, uh, so the bottom part here is that we cannot control our situation, but we can control our attitude or how we experience it. And it's easier said than done, of course. But you know, some people. One example of this is that when you lose a very important game that your team is involved in, and you practice very hard, and when you lose by a small margin, you feel like something like, "Oh, God," or "Amida was not with me." But that is not the position that we take. Things happen, and we need to have a mental wherewithal, the strength, wisdom to accept it, to see it for what it is, and then using that as a kind of a opportunity to improve for the next time, or to make our lives much more meaningful. Because we face losses in our lives that we cannot just simply say, "Oh, that's why life is no good." Valley of tears, or but we take that and to learn from that, and make it so that it becomes a fertilizer for your mind to be able to to really attend to the people who are with you now, the loved ones who are now. And so impermanence is a teaching not to give up, but to really relish what is in front of us. Okay, so turning problems to opportunities. This is almost common sense, and it may not even have to be Buddhism, but you know, so what we consider to be negatives or difficulties, if you face up to it, you can allow it to be a source of learning, and to learn about yourself. And in the chapter, I talk about the last one of a sense of inferiority, which, by the way, everyone feels this, has this. We think that those who are very capable, or wealthy, or intelligent, or good looking, they have no worries, but everyone has a bit of inferiority complex. And I talked about my own self when I had to come with my American-born mother back, and she wanted to go back to the U.S. from Japan, and so our whole family moved. And at the age of 10, couldn't speak a word of English, strange land, and then I was a racial ethnic minority, religious minority. And back then, being a Buddhist was not easy. And so, but eventually, as I turned and took this, what I considered to be negative, and was able to turn into a positive, because when I started to study Buddhism, my Japanese was better than others, so I was able to learn the classical language. And so sometimes what you think is a negative, or negative leading to a sense of inferiority, it can, if you have faith, and that can turn into a strength. And that can happen to many of the qualities that you have. Um, so, first person is a value that is very important in Buddhism. Is that um, the teaching has to be make sense for you. So it has to be applied to you first, and it has to be we face up to the problems of life as a personal matter first and foremost. And so there is we read about the parable of the poisoned arrow. Before that there was a monk who asked about all kinds of theoretical and metaphysical questions. But the Buddha said, "You're shot by an arrow. The arrow is stuck in your chest. Don't be asking all these questions and worrying about the world, and worrying about others is important. It's good, but first you have to pull the arrow out." And so it's a personal issue. It's not even for your spouse or your children or your parents. It's for you. And if you feel the need, go for it, and really dive into it. And and the and of course, if you remember the outer jewel, one of the qualities is that each jewel is very distinct. It's unique almost. Shape, color, sheen, size, they're all unique for you. And that is a, a an outlook, a teaching that we can apply to ourselves, that uh, we have to attend to our uniqueness. And in the number 8 issue, uncertain about my future work. And sometimes we compare ourselves with others. Oh, this is especially for younger people, younger generation. But comparing ourselves with others, and we envy those who do well. But there are obviously things that are unique to you, distinct to you, and uh, and so this applies to the fact that we have to think in a personal matter, personal for you. And then once you become have the space in your heart to think about others, then you will naturally do what we can for others as a part of your human nature. Okay, so importance of physical well-being. Well, this is quite obvious that in Buddhism, mind is not separate from the body. Body and mind are one and the same. And so in Buddhism, there's what's called the 3 learnings, sangaku, and it includes conduct, how to conduct yourself, and then meditation and wisdom. So you have conduct is bodily, how you conduct yourself, and maintaining a healthy and well-functioning body is important for your mentally. And this applies to everything all the issues that are in the chapter and beyond. Okay, so what I just talked about reflects what we have already learned in chapter 9, the 4 marks of life, which are, as you know, is, this left side are the 4 marks. You know, we already covered this, so life is a bumpy road, but we have a tendency to think that life ought to be smooth. Okay, so that this is very important in enabling us to think that when something happens, we say, "Why me?" Well, it happens to everyone. That's how life is. In some sense, there's the good news and bad news for being born a human. Um, uh, Bad news is that we have difficulties. Uh, we illness and aging. Aging is not necessarily bad, you know. I mean, if you can be, you can age and reach the age of 100 and never get sick, and so aging itself is not bad. However, aging does quite often is accompanied by illness, and you are closer to death. Okay, so second one is life is interconnected or interdependent, and but life should be mine is how we instinctually say it should go my way. And one example is example 3 in the chapter on breaking up. You know, when break up or well, divorce is a one form of breaking up, and we come together for all host of reasons. I mean, the fact that two people come together and develop a relationship, it's a result of incredibly huge number of causes and conditions that bring us together. And then when we break up, that is the same. There are causes that go beyond what you can control, right? So, but when you don't want to break up or have the relationship end, you say, well, you should go my way. He is mine, she is mine. But the fact of the matter is that no one is yours. And because what happens is due to causes and conditions. Okay, and then the other one is obviously impermanent. And in the chapter 9, a grandson loses his grandfather, death of a family member, and uh, and and for one way of appreciating this or facing this or accepting this is that life, the Buddha has said, it's not forever, and so with the teaching of impermanence, we are better able to accept death of a loved one. So also there is an example, chapter 8, where a young person is saying he or she is uncertain about the future work, and the response by one of the older young person is that, well, life is impermanent, so you're still young, you can change. And for many of us, we're not so young, so but even then, changes occur, so you don't have to decide on one thing. Maybe you can tell your grandkids that things change, so what you think is important now will not be so in the future, and some things which you don't think is important are important will become important. So keeping the sense of that life is constantly flowing, and we know that in our head, but often we're not able to live up to it, live in accordance with it. And life can be great, and this is that in all these talks about dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and suffering, that with very sincere adherence to the teachings and practicing this, there will be a sense that despite it all, despite all the things, that we can come to a sense that life is great. Life is, filled with the positives. But to get to that, one has to really cultivate oneself and how we look at the world. And example 9 had to do with a young person who says she feels fear of death, and it's something that I can identify because that's the kind of experience when I was a teenager. But actually, this is what Shakyamuni Buddha experienced. Remember, in his four gates out of the castle, one of the things that he saw was a deceased person, and really shook him up, along with a sick person and very frail old person. But so he had this, this life is very fearful, something to, but that's why that got him to seek an answer, and eventually, and because of his efforts, he came to realize what we call awakening, and that is none other than a sense of feeling that life can be great. So the suffering can be a catalyst, but it can lead to to a much more positive outlook on life and the meaning of life. So you've heard this many times. These are the four marks: thinking big, but don't think small. Okay, so lastly, this is not in anything that you even learned so far, and not in the chapter, of course. This is something that I have been thinking in more recent years, that Buddhism, talks about overcoming the gas, greed, hatred, and stupidity, and getting over craving, etc. And another way of talking about the goal of Buddhism is that you come to develop an authentic self. It's not the ordinary self, the self that you think ordinarily, but through the Dharma, you come to realize that there is the authentic self, and but in order to get to that, to realize that, one has to realize that I am part of a net of interdependence, which is fundamentally compassionate. So, so compassionate interdependence is another phrase for talking about perhaps Dharmakaya or Amida Buddha, and so and when you see that you are part of that, yourself becomes more authentic. So this is none other than the inner jewel that we talk about in the Jewels book. We had the outer jewel, the net of Indra, then inner jewel from the Lotus Sutra, where the person eventually finds that there is an inner jewel that is not that will shine forth through cultivation and learning the Dharma. And so actually, when often Buddhism says non-self, but that is a very complicated topic, and but ultimately, Buddhism helps us to realize something that is real within ourselves, and that allows us to deal with these 10 different kinds of challenges and issues that it doesn't do well. It's not just to take some teaching and kind of logically apply it, but it has to come to you first, and then you change, and then you're able to deal with various issues. So so in this, Dhammapada is one of the, as many of you know, Dhammapada is one of the earliest teachings, earliest sutras that is quite easy to understand. And this one, with yourself well trained, you attain the mainstay, hard to obtain. Mainstay, I'm kind of equating with authentic self that I talked about. When we say Buddhism says non-self, you think there's nothing, but actually through the teachings, you develop kind of an authentic self. And this is something that is not sometimes overlooked, but we need, that is a quality that all, luminaries in Buddhism, from Shakyamuni Buddha to, Nagarjuna to Shinran to Dogen to Nichiren, and so in the Mahayana Sutra, Nirvana Sutra, they actually talk about true self, Shinga, or great self, or Taiga. And then here there's a quote: the great physician king Buddha, who feels compassion for the world, is tranquil in both body and wisdom. Amid the teachings of non-self, there exists the true self. I thus bow in deep respect to the most honored one. So the second to the last line, amidst the teachings of non-self, there exists the true self. In Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, we talk about Shinjin, and I feel that Shinjin is the realization of the true self. Okay, so, and then lastly, so this is again a passage from the earliest sutra called Sutta Nipata, and it's supposed to be the earliest, earlier than Dhammapada. But here is an example of someone who has become awakened, and so the wandering solitary sage, uncomplacent, unshaken by praise or blame. So this is really important. An enlightened person is not complacent. He cares, he or she is concerned about others and the world around him or her. And this is also important. Unshaken by praise or blame. I think when we are praised, we feel good. I'm sorry, when we are blamed or criticized, it really is hard on. And then when we're praised, we feel good. But an enlightened person is not moved even by praise. It doesn't get to his or her head, and maintains this equanimity and ability to, observe. So this analogy of someone who is like this is like a lion unstartled by sound or any other animal, or a wind, or in a net. So wind is not snared or caught by a net. It's free. It's not obstructed. And then the lotus flower, as you know, grows in water and muddy water, but it's not smeared. So all these examples show how they are not buffeted. They're not, impacted negatively by the stimulus. They have the sense of self. They have a sense of true self, and that is one of the qualities when one becomes more awakened. By the way, you will have access to this PowerPoint in the class materials that you have been shown. There is, at the end of each communique, there is a link that you can go and you can find it. This will be under 9-1. Okay, so this concludes my talk. Okay, so we have maybe one comment. Sorry, I always wanted to leave some time for comment, but never. How about so Theo? Since I haven't seen you for a while, or at least I didn't notice you. Maybe you have been showing up, but since you're in Australia, are you still in Australia? Can you unmute?
Yes, I am, Sensei.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So I'll pick on you. Any comment or questions about what I just said, or about the chapter?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I'm not. I didn't participate in the last meeting, but yeah, I'm here today, and I was wondering also about what Johannes has in the comment section of Zoom
Oh,
about this differentiation of what would be. How can we talk about self
mm,
under the light of the non-self teaching of the
yeah,
Buddha? I know maybe it's the kind of the differentiation between egocentricity and individuality
yeah,
somehow. Like,
yeah. Well, okay. So the Johannes poses a question: how do we see the authentic self in relation to illusions of self through dependent origination? So, okay. Um, there are different ways of answering this. When you see that you are not an substantial self because you are influenced by dependent others, or that's why we say we're in a realm of interdependence, and we are also always changing. So when you see that, when we see that we are always changing, we are connected to others, then you don't really cling on to yourself that, I did it my way. I have the only answer. And when you see that you are, when you come to see that, then you see there's a greater sense of uh, that. So the wisdom will lead to true self. When you see that you are just, you are a relative being in changing, and so that uh, wisdom and understanding about that will create a confidence. So this is, see, Buddhism often talks about the changing phenomenon and how we should not be attached to it. But once you see that and come to a fuller understanding, there develops a greater confidence within you, a stability, and if that deepens, that is the true self. And so we can say true self is for in early Buddhism they talk about uh, you know uh, entering the stream, stream enterer, and that is the first level of awakening. And and that is a kind of a wisdom that you develop, and then that's when true self kind of comes forth. And Jodo Shinshu, Shinjin, as I said, Shinjin is the same kind of a awakening. And when you experience that, then there is a greater sense of gratitude, greater sense of indebtedness, greater sense that you are connected to all things. And so that's why I'm saying it's more subjective. So uh, that's so when you come to understand, then the true nature, the true self will emerge. And so there's a famous, and I'll close with this. In there's a Zen, there's a talk about, at the first stage, um, mountains and rivers are mountains and rivers. Like we know ordinarily we experience mountains. But on the second level, we analyze the mountains and rivers, that the mountain is not just a mountain in that way, but it's comprised of trees and dirt and birds and all the things that make up. And so the second level is where we get, for example, the teaching of non-self. But okay, uh, and then there's a third level when the mountains are again mountains and rivers are again rivers. But at the third level, the true self has emerged. So the ordinary self that is non-self teaching is on the second level. So when I'm talking about the true self, I'm talking about the third level. That's the level that we need to go in order to understand Buddhism. Okay, so I want to end with that, and we want to give our first speaker, Denise Cork, and she is here. She's originally from Canada, but she's now in Japan. And I want to share, actually, Denise, there she is. There we are. We are in Japan. This is a shot taken last week, and this is in front of the Tokyo station. It's a really, beautiful structure, and it looks like Europe. And but here you have a flag of Japan. So this is in Tokyo, and so we were. I was lucky to see Denise in Tokyo, and spend some time together. And so she's coming to us from Hiroshima, Japan. So Denise, can you and you can talk a bit about yourself and so thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanaka. I'll call you Ken.
Yes, call me Ken.
Or Your Honor, as you said.
No, okay. Wait a minute.
That's
You
a
have to
joke.
you have to put it in perspective because
Yeah.
we said goodbye when we took the shot, and she's been having problems because we met for the first time, and she says, and finally she says, what should I call you? Because she was having problems. So I said, just call me Ken or Your Honor, and that's how we parted. So I think maybe I'll compromise with Reverend Ken. That I think someone like yourself who go to temple, and I think there's a sense of intimacy, and um, that's what a lot of people call their ministers nowadays in the U.S. And so, okay,
Hey, thank you. Yes. To put that in perspective, I'm from Canada. I grew up in BC, Vancouver area, and I'm here in Japan for that's been on my bucket list for a long time. And I'm here, thankfully, with my oldest daughter, and so we're traveling around and really getting into the culture and enjoying ourselves. So thank
oh,
you.
by the way, sorry, I may interrupt because this is supposed to be a chat, but she said a very good pun, and if we have a time, well, I'll explain it later. It's one of the best puns I've heard. You have to know a little bit of Japanese too, but she's learning Japanese apparently, so it was great. So anyway, go ahead.
Thanks. So I'll say my setting actually for this topic is very apropos as I view it. Um, the setting of Hiroshima, that's where I'm the city that I'm in right now. It's very sobering, and so applying it to the issues and problems in daily life. I think of is it mushi mushi? Is that complaining?
Uh,
Um,
butsu butsu.
butsu
No?
butsu.
Yeah, butsu butsu. Yeah.
Butsu butsu. Okay.
And
I
by
think
the
it's
way, butsu butsu can mean also, butsu means Buddha. So
ah,
I always have a pun called the Buddha doesn't always complain. So hotoke wa butsu butsu iwanai. And most Japanese laugh at it, because it's kind of ironic. Anyways,
and they do in our temple too.
yeah.
So yeah, it makes me feel like all of my sufferings, all of my difficulties are just so uncomparably insignificant. So in a way that helps me to release a little bit too, which is very powerful. So yeah, Hiroshima, the site of the atomic bomb, the historic atomic bombing 80 years ago, 100,000 people were killed. Um, but there were survivors as well and future survivors. And we were able to speak with someone for quite a while. we were very fortunate. We just my daughter Randy, she just happened to hear him while we were at the site of the atomic bomb dome, and he had a little sign on him, and he comes there every single day, and he felt it is his duty to speak of the truths of what he has experienced. He was inter utero, so his mom was pregnant with him at the time of the bombing, and so he was born very shortly afterwards. So he has the effects of it, both physiologically and psychologically. And so, hearing it from that perspective, it was interesting to hear how much is. I mean, the government plays a real picture in not. They've got their role of the government, so they don't want to spread fear. And so he was explaining some of the truths and the realities of it. So that was very important to hear. So I wasn't even going to speak to that, but because we experienced that, it was very significant. So, well, I grew up in a family that went to the United Church. We were Protestants. My grandparents went there. Actually, my grandfather, he was the second registered member in the Crescent United Church down near White Rock. And it was the joke because he was so sociable that he probably stopped to talk to someone. Otherwise, he would have been the first member. So that's what I grew up with. And my grandma taught Sunday school, kindergarten at the church. And so I that was my practice. It wasn't every Sunday. It was definitely Easter and Christmas. That's what we did for sure. But from a very early age, I really had a thought that there was I had a different concept of heaven and hell. I viewed it to be actually very comparable what Buddhism talks about, a hell on earth. I viewed it as not ever attaining heaven until I was perfect. So it was a sense of a path. And so in that way, I can kind of link it to Buddhism in that I didn't view it as I would just go there. It was something more than that. It was something that I had to also work towards as well. And so, and then the opposite was if you were a sinner, if you were bad, because that language was used in our church, that you would go to hell. To me, that just wasn't a possibility. It was more that you had to have absolved all sense of goodness in you to get there. So that was my original sense of, I guess, detachment from the church that I grew up in. I had a different philosophy a little bit, and also I did have that philosophy of a reincarnation, which some practicing Buddhists do. And so I had a real closeness to nature. I had a closeness and a real deep thoughts of my ancestry, and I had many connections, even in my very Caucasian neighborhood, of connecting to the Japanese culture. I actually tried years ago learning the language, but more so in terms of the beautiful characters and learning to print them and that. So I had a very strong interest in that. My neighbor frequently went to Japan, and I don't quite I looked after her cat, and I don't quite understand what her role was, because she was associated with the embassy. She went to see princes and so I don't even know to this day what she did, but she brought that culture back to me. She brought back souvenirs, and they were always Japanese mementos and things like that. So and also later on, when I was a young adult, I worked in Richmond at a chocolate store. I managed a chocolate store, and this one young woman, she kept on coming in, and she liked my smile, she said, and she kept on coming back, and she was Japanese and had very little English practice and knowledge, and so she timidly asked if I would go out for coffee or tea with her, and she had that practice of always bringing me gifts each time we met, and I was so uncomfortable with that because my culture was like, okay, what should I give you back? But that it was a learning process for me, so that was very interesting. So in going back into so I wrote down a few things. Something I was looking, I think, for with Buddhism, something different than my own understanding. And so I actually never started going. I just phoned someone. I moved out to Abbotsford. We've lived out there for 40 years now, but I'm 61 now. And so in my 40s, I sought out Buddhism. And so I was reading, actually, Oceans was one of my first books that I read. And so I liked that parable, that analogy of going through life and what things meant. And it was very interesting. I just phoned up. I looked at that stage. We had the Yellow Pages. I phoned up the temple, got our temple chair, actually, Lucy Yoshioka, and so just went to the first Buddhist service, and I was thinking, okay, I eat meat. How is that going to work? Because my thought is, okay, do I need to be a vegetarian? I've been to Las Vegas. Okay, how will that fit in? That's gambling. That's not good. And so I had all these beliefs of what I should be like, and also of what is expected of me, and also of who I was as well. And the other thing was alcohol. Okay, we drank wine and things like that. Well, the very first service I attended, afterwards we had it was close, it was just before Christmas, and they had a we had as always, we had a wonderful potluck, and so there was meats and it was, there was sushi there, and I thought, oh, I'm in. But that wasn't the true reason I kept on attending. I think it was the sense of the people. They were so welcoming, and I'm going to get teary-eyed about that, because at that point in my life, it was so important of being welcomed. And so yeah, it was just, I felt comfortable from the get-go. And we had bingo that day, because that's the session that's the day we have bingo at the end of the year. And it's fun, and it's a little bit more festive, and so I thought, oh, there's gambling. So I'm okay. I think people were even going to a poker game afterwards. So I had a sense of, I think I'm home, and it was well, it still is, and primarily elderly Japanese congregation, or sangha, and they've reached out to me so beautifully, and that's another reason why I'd really like to learn speaking the language more. I can read it a little bit, and that's about it. But yeah, I'd like to become a little bit more closer to my own sangha. So getting into I've decided to focus in on number 4 of chapter 9, and that is death of a family member. I thought, wow, like I think Reverend Ken, I think you were speaking to me when you gave me this topic, because it wasn't specifically death of a family member, but just suffering because throughout COVID, our family has gone through that period, as I'm sure so many have. We happen to have lost 14 family members throughout COVID. And so it wasn't because of COVID, but the experience of being around COVID, it was mostly cancers. And from the beginning, we were able to honor in a more group setting. And then there were most of the family members we were not, because they weren't having group settings at that time. So it was a more, to me, that was a different level of suffering, because you weren't able to do your normal practice. You weren't able to have the closure and things like that. So I'll explain a little bit about my life. And I was one of the first cores of a new millennium, changing roles in my career with the Correctional Service of Canada. So I was initially in a clerical role, and I've dealt with a lot of challenging situations, and I've written down this a little bit so I can remember it, so I can explain it to you. So I've responded to a lot of serious incidences. So, however, 10 years ago, I had never experienced death up close before. And in the summer of 2015, that was all about to change dramatically. On the night, and this is where it's very specific to me, on the night of June 15th, I heard a call for response within the segregation unit at Matsqui Institution where I worked. And while running to the post to help, I imagined of what would be happening when I got there, because we had been briefed about a potential staff assault. And so that's what I was thinking that I was responding to. And I had anticipated that the inmate was assaulting an officer, and that's what I was running to assist with. And this was not the case. It was an inmate. When I arrived, I discovered that an inmate had barricaded himself in the cell. And so we didn't know exactly what was going on. And we had 3 officers present. We opened the cell door and to find the inmate hanging from a handmade noose from his bed sheets. So as per protocol, I did everything to attempt to save the inmate from dying. And that was a real moral dilemma, because having worked with inmates, I had seen when very specific times when it was either like if it was a drug overdose or something like that, that it wasn't intentional, or if it was seeking help and that. This particular case, he had done everything possible in order to have a successful suicide. And so I knew he had been hanging for a while without oxygen, and yet my role was to revive him at all expense and at all costs. And so I knew that he had been without oxygen probably for at least 45 minutes at the time. And so and that was by the time the fire and emergency services had arrived. So I knew that we were creating a person without brain capacity. And so that was a real moral dilemma, and that he would never function outside of a hospital. So at the beginning of my next shift, I was advised that he had in fact deceased in the hospital. So that was my first up close experience with death. And how horrific it was. I never imagined how much one can grow from learning from a difficult situation. And that was very, very true to my experience. And so this event and the experience of that evening brought me plunging into a series of mental health issues. I developed PTSD, and so and that's post-traumatic stress disorder for those who don't know that. So I was given an option to, at that point, to seek help and to and so I just plunged myself into anything that they would give me to help grow, and I think that was good for me, but it was also good for the experience too.
Okay, excuse me, Denise.
Yeah. I am going so over time. I mean, I haven't got where I was.
Yeah. So I know you have a lot, I mean, I noticed that you've gotten very emotional and which is fine. I mean, I'm sure it's been traumatic for you. Uh, we need 10 minutes, so
Okay.
can you
Okay,
do it?
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So after that, the year following, my mom passed, and we were able to experience that. She passed on my birthday. Then we kept on losing family members. We lost my son-in-law's brother, then my aunt, and then my uncle. And it was my favorite aunt. And then we lost all of my mom's family. And it was all through various cancers. And then we lost my son-in-law, Randy, who is with me today. Her husband passed, and that was at a time when I talked to you, Ken, that
Yeah.
it was very important in having that relationship, I think. So overall, all of those experiences, I view. I've taken and I've heard your line, your horizontal line and the vertical line, and I've kind of interpreted it originally differently, and I'm okay with that because I view the vertical as one moment in time, and that gives me the faith that and the trust that that's all it is one blip. When in the process of dying, the each moment of suffering is a moment of suffering, because throughout suffering there are blips of laughter, there are blips of non-suffering, and so to me suffering is just one moment, and it's not a continuum at all. And that's one thing that I quickly wanted to say was each of those experiences that I've had has made it easier to deal with the next experiences because I've been able to grow with it. And it's been just, it's allowed me to view death as something sacred, so that it's honoring. So what was once a problem or an issue or a suffering for me is a blessing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Can you, that's really a very thought-provoking comment that it's an honor and a blessing. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. To actually be there present with the death of my son-in-law. And I didn't mention that last year my sister passed as well, and I was able to be present and experience their dignity, experience their, like I was able to melt from myself and be with them in everything that they were experiencing. And it showed how interconnected we were and are. Yeah.
So in those situations, you're able to maybe just have nothing blocking you,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I see. So of course, did you feel sadness of?
Oh, of course there was sadness, but it was almost, with my sister last year, it was almost like I felt that sense of attachment. I was able to break that sense of attachment in that I wanted her here. I wanted her to stay. And yet I could see her body wanted to be leaving.
Mhm.
And I was I was able to accept that. And I guess that's what it was that a sense of acceptance and not wanting to clutch on and yeah, I guess the clutching, like thinking about it now, the clutching really is all about me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so the letting go was the release and allowing her that dignity. And yeah.
So, as often Buddhism says, that clutching, as you say, or craving is what causes the suffering for me. But your experience has taught you that letting go, in a way, you're honoring, you know, your sister for what she has to do, or,
Yes. Yeah.
so, yeah, well, this is well, okay. This is,
And can I just also add that the
sure.
experience of death is like, although each death is different, there are some things that our bodies do, all of our bodies will do and have certain, so it sort of brings it back to how interconnected we are and how, yes, and how much of a process it is. That's, yeah.
Mm. Okay. Well, do you want to say something else? We have about 5 minutes, so
Okay. Actually, I think just with that line of the vertical of how I've kind of interpreted on my own way. I still love your interpretation and I use that. So,
yeah,
but like the past is completed. And so that vertical moment in time, that vertical moment where I might be suffering or in pain or anything else like that,
yeah,
it goes away. And once that, like, it stops. When you have chronic pain, there are moments in time, um, during your day, throughout whenever, when you can experience life and forget about it.
mm,
And so that's kind of what it's like, is you stop suffering, and you don't know what your future is. So yeah.
okay. Comments, questions?
Denise,
I,
hey, hello there. How's it going?
Go ahead,
Hello.
David.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Denise, definitely very, very moving, and I'm glad you're having a good time in Japan right now. And when I visited there, the few times I've gone has been a spiritual journey as well, almost a fulfillment of many things that I that I find in uh, fleshing out what we're reading in when we study Buddhism. And I found it really interesting that when you chose Buddhism to go into, when you left, well, not left, or just decided to add on to your religious journey, your um, a realization that the usual way of doing religion in Canada was not working for you, and so you found a way to in this terrible time to find it easier, that Buddhism gave you the ability to let go, not to clutch, but in letting go, there's a not only a way to help you feel better about letting go, but also to give dignity to the process. You're not letting go to say, "Oh well, I can't do anything about it, so I'm going to do whatever I can to numb myself on the process." No, that's not what you did. The idea was that you brought dignity to the change of death, which is a part of life, and I was wondering if that's anywhere close to what your experience was, that you found a way to let go, but also in such a dignified manner that gave it more meaning and care for the person that passed away.
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right,
What I'd like to say is that it allowed me to lean into it.
got it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We often, on a doctrinal level, we talk about death as suffering, but I think, Denise, you helped us to bring out another dimension. Uh, when we let go, you see experience the dignity and the sacredness, and then allowing that person to take whatever, whatever happens to that person. So, all right. Thank you for bringing that. I've learned. I mean, I really, you helped me think about what I just said about, it's not just suffering, that there are other elements to it. Once pull back or let go of your craving, and that there are, sacredness, even dignity in death of someone you love. And so thank you. Okay, we like to invite Reverend Higa. Where are you?
Can I quickly just say one thing is, not out of disrespect to anyone here, I will have to be leaving early because we have to catch a bullet train.
All right. Well, no problem. Where are you going next?
We are going to Kyoto next.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be going to the home temple as well.
Yeah. Say hello to the head priest, Gomonshu.
I will.
I won't be able to see him, but you can.
No,
Yeah.
I will
Okay.
think of him.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Good. Have a good time. Thank you so much. Reverend Blayne?
Hi. Hello there.
Oh, great, great. Okay, so Reverend Blayne Higa is the resident minister in Kona, Hawaii, one of the pure lands on earth. So they say. So they say. Okay, so floor is yours.
Hi. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being here. You know, um, just briefly, maybe I can introduce myself. I am the minister of the Kona Honganji on the Big Island of Hawaii. I was born and raised actually on the island in Hilo, on the east side of the island. And I grew up Buddhist, but I didn't grow up Jodo Shinshu. My mom's family is Shingon. My dad's family is Jodoshu. But it wasn't until I left for college on the mainland, on the continent, that I came to really explore the question of why I was a Buddhist. And that came about through being asked, so what does being a Buddhist mean? And I had no good answer for that. Growing up, as a Buddhist, you go to services, you go to rituals, but I didn't really know anything about the actual teachings and why um, it was so meaningful in my own life. And until I began reading, and I read everything I could find in English. And many books that I found were about Shin Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, and I was captured by this idea of boundless compassion and how we could be living within boundless compassion and sustained by that. And for me, as I reflect on my life, that these are so many causes and conditions that have come together, which have made me who I am, has brought me to this place and this time, and that is the working of the Dharma. That is the working of innumerable causes and conditions, the unfolding of the Dharma in my life, and how it has given me so much meaning and a sense of purpose. And so while I was reading about Buddhism, and it was kind of like a nightstand Buddhist for a while in college, and I didn't really know until I came home to Hawaii after graduating. And one day I walked across. I was living in Honolulu at the time, and I one Sunday I walked across to the Mo'ili Honganji in Honolulu, and went to a Sunday service there, and was immediately welcomed and greeted. And the second thing that I was asked to do would you be interested in volunteering for this nonprofit we have? It's a group of volunteers called Project Dana. It's an interfaith elderly caregivers group, and so they match up temple volunteers with people in the community who need assistance with shopping, with picking up groceries, and things like that. And so I was paired up with this woman who was in her 90s and lived alone, and I would take her shopping every week for like at least a good couple years. And for me, that was remarkable, right? To see a community, right? People who were not just talking about their values and their teachings, but who were living their teachings in a very real, very dynamic, very very real way, basically. Like for me, Buddhism is an embodied experience, right? We have Buddha Dharma Sangha, right? The Buddha lives on through his teachings, but is actualized through the Sangha. And for me, Sangha is the most important of the three treasures, because it is only within Sangha that all these things are come about, right? Are manifested. Because what we're talking about, as we talk about, right, dealing with daily life and dealing with problems, right? That's where the rubber meets the road, on a daily basis. How does the teachings help me to better manage my life? How do the teachings help me to understand life with a sense of openness, a sense of compassion, a sense of grace, right? That is, for me, the true essence of Buddhism, right? It's a path for living and living well in this present moment. And so as we, think about our lives, right, in this present moment, in this time in history, right, as we think, as this chapter is talking about daily problems, we have so many problems every day in America right now. That is the nature of our existence. And so I wanted to kind of reflect on and offer these thoughts with you about how Buddhism can offer wisdom for living in these challenging times and help us to develop courage to face all that we are facing. And so, as we face life's challenges, which can sometimes seem overwhelming, we should reflect on the Buddha's fundamental teaching of impermanence and how there is always potential for transformation and change. Whatever situation or circumstances we find ourselves in is never permanent, right? Just like how happiness and good fortune are fleeting, like when we go to Vegas. We win some, you lose some, right? But so are sadness and misfortune. Impermanence means that we're never stuck, never trapped in our lives. However, the Dharma does not give us ready-made answers to life's problems or challenges. Rather, the teachings honor the unique circumstances of our lives by pushing us to go deeper into our own human experience, enabling us to discover the answers within. This is a path of deep self-reflection and insight which reveals to us a life of profound creativity, compassion, and spiritual awakening. Our country is in a time of crisis, right? As the communal fabric of our society is being intentionally frayed by those in power. The constant attacks on the most vulnerable in our society and the weakening of our institutions and the laws that protect us diminish who we are as a nation. Right? Real people, families, and communities are being hurt by these unjust policies. The cruelty and malice being demonstrated are antithetical to the values I hold as a disciple of the Buddha. These lamentable actions do not represent me nor many in our country who value compassion, mercy, equality, and the rule of law as guiding our communal life in a free and democratic society. We need to deeply reflect on our most cherished values and have the courage to embody them in these dark times. Right? Shakyamuni Buddha teaches that nobility is not a matter of one's birth, but rather determined by one's actions. In the Sutta Nipata, the Buddha says, one becomes a thief by action. By action, one becomes a soldier. One becomes a priest by action. By action, one becomes a king. In the Shin Buddhist tradition, our altars reflect this teaching of nobility based on one's actions. A pair of hanging ornaments called sumi yuraku flank the image of Amida Buddha in the central altar. that are derived from jewelry worn by nobles in ancient India. These beautiful ornaments represent the attainment of nobility through noble deeds. The Buddha understood that we are ennobled or demeaned based on our conduct and our actions. We attain nobility when we strive for that which is good and wholesome, ensuring the welfare and the well-being of all. Guided by the Buddha's teaching and his wisdom, how would we assess the actions of our current leaders? How would we assess our own actions in this time? In India, during the time of the Buddha, he rejected the oppressive caste system, which arbitrarily assigned class and status based on one's birth. This system of control nurtured division by artificially determining the desirable and the undesirable, the worthy and the unworthy in society. However, the Buddha believed in the radical equality of all people, despite the circumstances of our birth. The Buddha teaches us that no one is above or below another in this life, that we are all equal. Since its inception, the Buddhist Sangha has been and continues to be a place of refuge for all people, affirming that each of us is worthy of dignity, compassion, and respect. We are taught that it is our responsibility to protect and to care for one another with a heart of compassion and love. A story from the Buddha's childhood, right, illustrates this ethic of concern for the welfare of others. One day, the young Siddhartha was walking in the palace garden when suddenly a swan dropped from the sky and fell to the ground in front of him. As he rushed over, he discovered the swan was in great distress because an arrow had pierced one of its wings. Right, Siddhartha quickly picked up the injured swan, pulled out the arrow, and took the bird inside to tend to its wound. Not long after, Siddhartha's cousin, Devadatta, came by clutching a bow and arrow and demanded that the bird was his because he had shot the bird himself. However, the young prince adamantly refused Devadatta's demands, as he was moved by great compassion to protect the injured swan. After arguing for a while, they took their concern to the court ministers, asking them to render judgment. After a lengthy discussion, the ministers were also unable to agree, but many seemed to be siding with Devadatta. However, Siddhartha's father, the king, agreed with him that the bird should be left in his care to be nursed back to health. The young Siddhartha had stood up to everyone, saving the life of the injured swan. His compassionate and courageous actions demonstrated the nobility of his spirit. In a poignant retelling of the story in Old Path, White Clouds, the late Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh recounts the Buddha's reflection on the significance of protecting the wounded swan. He says, "In this world, few people will look with the eyes of compassion, and so we are cruel and merciless toward each other. The weak are always oppressed by the strong. I still see that my reasoning that day was correct, for it arose from love and understanding. Love and understanding can ease the suffering of all beings. The truth is the truth, whether or not it is accepted by the majority. Therefore, I tell you, children, it takes great courage to stand up and to protect what is right." In our troubled world today, right, we need to emulate the courage of the young Siddhartha, to live our values by standing up for all who are suffering. In our sacred scriptures, the Buddha is said to proclaim the truth of the Dharma with a lion's roar. This is a time for each of us to find our voice, so together we can courageously declare the truth of compassion and love through both word and deed. The true attainment of nobility is not determined by wealth, power, or domination, but rather by the compassion and care we extend towards others. Our collective everyday acts of courage, love, and kindness are truly powerful and noble. That, for me, is the Buddhist path. We recently witnessed an example of this kind of courage so needed in our world today. At the National Prayer Service at Washington National Cathedral, after the presidential inauguration, Episcopal Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy shared a message of mercy and love with our nation's leaders and the world. Guided by her faith, she spoke truth to power, embodying her Christian values. I'm grateful to Bishop Buddy for her bravery, and I stand with her as a Buddhist priest, as an American, and as a person of faith. Her courageous and gentle words resonated with so many in our country and has inspired hope, reminding us of our own agency to speak truth to unjust power, guided by our own faith. In her book, How Do We Learn to Be Brave, she writes, "The courage to be brave when it matters most requires a lifetime of small decisions that have set us on a path of self-awareness, attentiveness, and willingness to risk failure for what we believe is right. It is also a profoundly spiritual experience, one in which we feel part of something larger than ourselves and guided somehow by a larger spirit at work in the world and within us. Like Bishop Buddy and the young Buddha, can we be brave? Brave to see the humanity in all people, regardless of national origin, immigration status, sexual orientation or gender identity, economic class, religious belief, political affiliation. Each of us is worthy of dignity, compassion, and respect. Brave to stand up for those who are being marginalized and hurt by unjust policies. Brave to give voice to our values in the face of criticism and threats of violence. Brave to live our innermost truths that no one can demean, diminish, or destroy, for we are always embraced by the light of all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion. Brave to embody the vows of a bodhisattva, saving all from suffering. In these dark and chaotic times, let us endeavor to listen to the Buddha Dharma with not just our ears, but with our entire being, and strive to embody the teachings and all that we do for the welfare and happiness of all, bravely imagining and building a world that should be. So for me, right, the Buddha's teachings give us a roadmap, give us a way of understanding the world that is compassionate, that is wise, that is grounded in the understanding that we are all connected and that we have a responsibility to be part of the solutions in life. And so thank you for allowing me to share. And I hope it offers some insight right into the way we can look at the Buddha Dharma and apply it to our daily lives in big and small ways, because that is where the teachings truly come alive. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Reverend Higa. Well, I think you've addressed one of the issues which I did not really deal with in the chapter, because this has you addressed issues related to politics and the political situation. And I'm personally with you in what you said just now. I've been very moved and almost emboldened by what you have to say. But I have a question. Have you gotten any pushback from others in your sangha or in the larger sangha that with the thought that religion should not be addressing issues related to politics? And so how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think that that any good teaching, right, offers us wisdom for living fully as human beings, right? And that includes the way we are with each other, right? And that also includes the way we govern our society, right? And seek to, create a society that nurtures all, right? That supports everybody, right? And so for me, right, sharing the Dharma, sharing the wisdom of the Buddha's teaching, right, is just that. It's not a political act, right, in and of itself, but it is inherently political in that it offers us a way of being in the world and how should we treat others, right? And if that is political, then that is political, right? But actually, we should never shy away from, right, reanalyzing our value systems, right? Why do we believe what we believe? How does it work in our lives, right? So what I hope to offer, right, is points of reflection and offering, first of all, reducing fear, right? There's so much fear in our country and our world right now. How can we reduce fear through the teachings? Secondly, how can we cultivate hope? Hope for transformation, hope for change, hope for mutual transformation, right? And then third, right, is to inspire action. How can we inspire each person in their own way, in big and small ways, to make a difference in the lives of others, to truly live these teachings in a way that is life-giving and life-transforming? To me, that the Buddha himself, right, was a leader of men and a leader of a spiritual leader, right, as well, but led a group, led a sangha, right? And there are rules of conduct and there are ways of being with each other that he prescribed, right? And so how do we live these values in a very real, very personal way, caring for each other, right? So.
Okay, well, I'm personally definitely with you, and how about others? Questions, comments?
Johannes posted a question. Well, it's a comment, rather. The Dalai Lama also said Buddhism is inherently political, together with wisdom and loving kindness.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
may I, if nobody else is...
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Higa. I really appreciate what you said. And I agree with Reverend Tanaka here and you, and I could all sign my name under what you just said. But I have a related question. I've been once at a seminar, actually at Jodo Shinshu Center, and it was during the first Trump administration. And there was a gentleman, he was, I believe, from Las Vegas, Sangha. So he almost made a scene, although there was absolutely no political discussion there, but he stood up, declared that he was a Trump supporter, and just all kind of, that was it. So I personally don't quite get it, how you can support these policies and call yourself a Buddhist, but we live in a twisted world. But my question is, how would you respond to such a person? Or even, is it worth responding? Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for your question and comment. I think that the teachings offer us an opening for self-reflection, right? That's what inherently the Buddha is asking us to do, is to always self-reflect on ourselves, right? And for me, right, are we able to create space to have dialogue, to have conversation, to be able to offer people an opportunity to self-reflect, right? But we all have to be in agreement that we are willing to be engaged in a conversation, in dialogue, engaged in deep self-reflection, right? Guided by the Dharma in our own lives. And if we're not willing to do that, then I'm not sure if a person is ready to be able to self-reflect in that way, right? But that doesn't mean that we should not have difficult conversations, right? That inherently the Dharma challenges our assumptions on all levels, right? The nature of our own realities, the nature of ourselves. And so for me, the Dharma, right, is a mirror into myself, helping me to see myself and how am I being and how am I doing and why am I doing, right? And that to me is the beauty of the teachings, right? And I think that's the opportunity that Buddhism offers, space for divergent viewpoints, right? Because each of our karmic conditions are unique, right? Our circumstances are personal. And so the way we will approach life will always be very, very different, right? But when we reflect using the Dharma, right, as our guide, right, can we get to a deeper understanding of ourselves, of the world around us, and how we are truly interconnected, and how when, right, as and Dr. Tanaka has talked about, right, of Indra's net, right? We are when one person, right, one jewel is not polished, it doesn't, it dims the light of others. And when one jewel is bright, it brightens the world around it, right? And reflects all of that, right? Endlessly, right? How do we do that? Right? I think that's the ultimate question for us
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
live in our society like this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask Igor, when that person stood up and said, "I'm a Trump supporter," uh, did anyone ask, uh, you know, his perspective on why he is a supporter, which is fine. I think in an environment, a Buddhist environment, as Reverend Higa just said, I think that there are people with different views because of their background, but it would have been nice to hear how that person came to that thinking, and he probably saw a different aspect of the president then. So
Well, Sensei, that was actually quite well. I don't know how to describe it. It was a seminar on enlightenment, by the way. It was a specific seminar, and the speaker, one of the speakers, said a very neutral thing. She was a professor, and she said she was teaching in Louisiana, and she said, "Well, we have different people there," and she said basically, "Well, we need to learn how to talk to those people too." That's
Mm,
exactly what she said. But then he took he raised his hand and he was the last person speaking there. And then he basically made a scene. He said, "Well, I'm a Trump supporter. I like crucify me, kind of." And she had to again get the microphone and try to explain that she only meant learning how to talk to different people.
yeah,
So no, there was no further discussion on that.
I
But
see, I see.
to me, it was just ridiculous that he chose to end the seminar on enlightenment that way. He made a big deal and he made it all about himself.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
okay.
My
Well,
question to him,
uh,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it would have been nice if there was an opportunity for him to express as a Buddhist. I think he was a Buddhist, right? To
He's a Shin Buddhist, and
yeah,
he was not a young person.
yeah, yeah. Well, so but there are people who are Buddhists who are like that. So, not too many, but well, anyway, thank you for bringing that up, and okay, Reverend Higa, thank you for your very moving and passionate explanation of where you stand, and I think that it's really needed, and I'm very heartened by your position because I don't think it as people, especially ministers, don't express that as strongly as you do. And I know you had an article somewhere when dealing with this issue, right? Was
Mm.
it? I read it
Yeah.
somewhere, and I thought,
Yeah, in Lion's Roar, Buddha Dharma. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, oh, in the Lions Roar, that's great. Yeah, I'm glad to see a Shin minister is, writing in a more pan-Buddhist environment. And I have tried to do that myself, especially in Tricycle magazine. And so all of you, even if you're not a minister, if you have thinking and thoughts, please express them, in your temple newsletters or whatever. Yeah, and I think that's important for especially younger generation to hear how Buddhism can be. Okay, well, we'd like to go more, but we're at the end of our time, and so thank you again, Reverend Higa, and also to Denise. Okay, so Nanjo Sensei, go ahead.
Yes. This concludes the formal presentations for today's session. We hope you found it instructive and meaningful. The link for the video recording will be sent to you in a couple of days. Please make use of it to deepen your understanding and for responding to the questionnaire. Our informal group discussion, the Nirvana Happy Hour with our speakers and Dr. Tanaka will begin soon. It will not be recorded. This will be a great time for questions or comments to bring up in an informal and relaxed setting. Everyone is welcome. The Nirvana Happy Hour is strictly optional. For those joining, we will take a short 5-minute break before starting. For everyone else, please keep in mind we will hold our in-depth discussion session on Saturday, May 17th. These discussions will not be recorded and is a great way to connect with Dr. Tanaka and other members of our Fireside Chat group. Our next and final regular Fireside Chat session is next month, June 7th. Our June session will bring to close our 2024 to 2025 Fireside Chats. As a wrap-up, we will cover Chapter 10, Questions on Buddhism, Chapter 11, Humor as Teaching, and the epilogue. As next month will be the last of this series, we'll be announcing shortly the details of the next course, which will be starting in September this year. Until then, please stay well and best wishes in your efforts to understand the Dhamma, both intellectually and spiritually.
Okay, thank you. All right. See you.